My name is Amanda Crouse, and for my term or word, I chose the word progress um, because I think that the perceived lack of progress achieved during the height of Nova Huta's construction in the 1950s is one of the key details around which its entire history pretty much is depicted. The framing of Nova Huta's history in our various course readings interested me because, regardless of their perspectives, most of them seem to adopt what Svetlana Boym, who was the author of The Future of Nostalgia, which I know we had to read a few chapters from, what she described as a teleological structuring of the past. The question of what could have been seems to have gained rhetorical leverage over the question of what is now. So, teleology is its own consequential theory that is commonly known as a theory of ethics and kind of determining virtue. But in her book, The Future of Nostalgia, Boym uses the word to describe a method of measuring progress. I know we already read about this for, one of our past class assignments, but I thought I would explain the term again just briefly since it was a while ago. Boym describes the teleological framing of history and progress as principally valuing tangible, especially spatial expansion and change over virtually all other signs of the passage of time. And I place the word positive between asterisks here because not all change is widely considered to be good. In the context of the future of nostalgia, Boym implies that good change, especially during the 19th and 20th centuries and into the current day, involves the spread of industrial life into yet undeveloped spaces, and the advancement of industrial life through new material inventions. As is implied in the quote here, progress was not only a narrative of temporal progression but also of spatial expansion. A satisfactorily progressive project should run apace with the speed of time's passage, or more abstractly, with man's concept of the speed of time. So, to explain how this applies to Nova Huta, the teleological form of analysis is not uncommon in general layman's source material on the construction of the, unsuccessful socialist utopia. I remember, I believe it was in Catherine Leibov's Unfinished Utopia, where the physical emptiness in the center of Ronald Reagan Square was kind of cited as evidence for the emotional or very particularly noticeable barrenness of the district. Another quote from Boym is, instead of coevalness of different conceptions of time, each local culture therefore was evaluated with regard to the central narrative of progress, with the somewhat ambiguous concept of progress becoming one of the most important historical demarcations of time. Other ways of thinking about the past, present, and future are given comparatively far less consideration. As a result, the linear interpretation becomes a default. So, if we were to look at the concept of Nova Huta, a socialist utopia civil engineering project through a teleological lens, then the consequences that we would evaluate would be, as is written here, pretty much the Polish government's abandonment of the project and the construction plans that were left unfinished, so that ultimately the heavily promoted socialist utopia never really came to fruition. In simple terms, Nova Huta can be described as a failure, in a sense, for its inability to develop into an entity of great benefit to the bureaucratic powers that be, or I guess powers that were. The teleological metrics upon which, according to Svetlana Boym, man's perception of progress have mostly relied since the 19th century dictate that material or visible evidence of change in the direction of a predetermined goal is the principal measure, kind of as I've already said, of a project's success, and Nova Huta simply did not bear sufficient tangible signs of utopianism. So one question that I would ask then is, if teleology is a dominant theory of tracking progress, and if society fails to make virtuous progress according to dominant teleological principles, then where on man's upward tilting axis of time does that society stand? I would answer that, to a degree at least, it may remain, at least in the view of broader society, in the past. Relegated to the purgatory of history books, its story is told as one whose beginning and ending align with those of its aspirations for the future. The failed society may only be given rhetorical treatment in its modern form insofar as it serves in the historical observation of the past failure that defines it. In post-communist narratives and collective memory, The Nova Huta of today exists primarily as a relic of the Nova Huta from 1950 and 1960. In general historical academia, it has transformed from a lively city district into a case study in socialist realist hubris. Catherine Lebov's Unfinished Utopia is arguably not as consequence-focused as the supplementary materials. It could even be argued to adopt something of a, like deontological or less consequential lens, because it focuses a lot on kind of some of the motivations behind the project. But I would still say, in general, the central focus of it at the end, or at least at the end of the excerpts that we read, tends to be on those motivations and kind of their virtuousness, really only so far as they contributed to the material result of Nova Huta. My second question is, in what ways, if any, might the cultural view of a community as archaic or inevitably linked to a specific narrative of the past affect the future progress of that community? What I mean basically is, can a failure at achieving sufficient progress in the past be a death sentence for a community's chances at achieving progress in the future? Is it inevitable that such reputations forcefully transform the district into a historical artifact, freezing it in time? Or could the relentless one foot in front of the otherness of teleology allow for fluctuations and forgiveness regarding change? So I apologize that I couldn't be there in person to actually pose these questions and hear responses. But thank you for a wonderful semester. It's been a, I think, really enriching kind of process in investigating Nova Huta. I did not even know that it existed before coming to Krakow and finding out about this course in particular. So I think it was really cool not only to be able to learn about it, but then also to interact with it physically through tours. And I know, since going there for the first time to the Dom Utopii, I revisited Nova Huta multiple times, especially just kind of as a quiet escape from the more bustling, crowded city center. So honestly, I really thought that the course has been quite obviously beneficial, but also definitely introduced me to a place that kind of became one of my favorite districts of the city, I guess. So yeah, that is pretty much all, and thank you for listening. And then these are some of my sources. I'll also put a link to, or I guess maybe a PDF form or a PowerPoint file of this presentation, so that the bibliography can be accessible. So thank you.